Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I've got a full tank review for you of the upcoming Clan Wars reward tank, the ST-62 version 2. This vehicle has an auto-reloader with an inverted auto-reloader mechanic, so after it dumps out its 3 100mm shells doing 960 damage in 4 seconds, then it is going to be reloading faster than if its magazine was full. That makes this the ultimate go in, dump your mag by just holding down your mouse button and then just keep going at optimal efficiency. It's also got a very freaky armor layout that I'm going to be going over inside the armor review of this section of the video, and just letting you know whether it's going to be worth sweating away in the maneuvers event that will be starting on Monday to try and get your hands on this vehicle. So I'm going to be comparing the ST-62 to a variety of other vehicles, namely the new Soviet Tier 10 medium meta tank, the K91, another autoloader with a 100mm gun at Tier 10, the TVP, and the Tier 9 Soviet premium medium tank, the Object 590. And why that is the case, yeah, you'll see. So immediately we notice that this vehicle has bad damage per minute. 2,400 is not good, significantly worse than the TVP, not much better than a Tier 9 tank, and the K91 makes this thing just look silly with regards to that. However, this thing has a 3-round magazine, a lot like the Tier 9, worse than the Tier 10 TVP. But unlike the Tier 9, which has a horrible 4-second intraclip reload, this thing is good at 2. It's not nearly as good as the TVP with 1.5, but considering the TVP then has to reload a whole mag rather than be reloading every 8 seconds, it's not bad. The real issue with the ST-62 is that it takes longer and longer and longer to reload each of its shells the more that you have in the magazine. When you're empty, it's 8 seconds, then it's 11 seconds, then it's 14 seconds. And when we work out exactly how much damage per minute you're getting when you're loading that final shell, it's 1,371. When I was playing this tank, it was so hard, often in combat situations, to be able to have that downtime to save up that third shell, and it really is the balancing mechanic of this tank. Remember that 2,400 damage per minute is only when the vehicle is empty. It's not going to store up damage quickly, which is incredibly awkward, unlike the TVP, which gets a pure 2,600, and you just reload the mag, you dump the mag, you reload the mag, and you dump the mag. This means that while you can go all in with an ST-62 version 2 and just keep holding down that mouse button, you've only got 2,400 damage per minute without a gun rammer, and that's barely any better than a Tier 9 premium. And the K91 with a gun rammer will literally be firing twice for every time you fire just about 1 shell. Or a better way of saying it is the K91 will fire 3 times before you've probably put in your second shell. The ammunition that the ST-62 gets is pretty good. It gets APCR rounds as standard with 1,320 meters a second shell velocity. It gets heat rounds with poor shell velocity but 330 millimeters a pen, and some HE rounds as well if you can manage to make those work. So now let's look at the gun handling of the ST-62, and it's really not good news. Pretty bad aim time, 2.3 seconds. Bad accuracy at 0.37, and not the best gun handling at 0.14 when moving and 0.1 when turning the turret, means that while you're certainly better than the Tier 9 premium medium tank, you're not even close to something like a K91, and frankly stumbling behind even a TVP. Add to this the fact that it's got 6 degrees of gun depression, which makes it feel very awkward on a ridgeline. And yeah, the gun handling is by far one of the worst aspects of this tank. The mobility, however, it's not good, it's not bad. 50 forwards, slowest in this comparison. 20 backwards, a half okay power to weight ratio of 18.5, but it does have the best ground resistances in this comparison that actually makes it feel not too bad. However, in this comparison, unless you're on soft, it is the slowest out of all of these vehicles. Now onto the armor of this tank. It gets 100 at the front, 75 at the side, 290 on the front of the turret, and 150 on the side of the turret. So when we look at the armor model, I'm hoping for absolute awesome, right? Okay, let's take a look. Oh, so I can be penned in the lower plate and the upper plate at the same time, and if I angle, I can still be penned in the lower plate and the upper plate at the same time. Well, what about if I use my 6 degrees of gun depression? Is that going to get me an auto ricochet angle? Not even really against standard rounds at Tier 10. And if they load heat, yeah, the whole of your tank is just the easiest thing to pen. I cannot stress how much this thing's armor is just so horrible and frustrating to play. Just the idea that your opponents can always pen you from the front, it's just so darn frustrating, even in the upper hull. However, when you turn the vehicle to the side and you do side scrape, Yeah, you get some really nice auto ricochets, but they're still going to be able to just go through your upper plate. If they load heat as well, then they're going to be going through more of your upper plate and even quite a lot of your side armor. And so the only real strength of this vehicle probably is the turret. If you are using the turret, it's great from the front. It's just trying to find those positions where you are going to be hull down. And even when you are using your gun depression, you do have a bit of a weakness exposed on top. And as soon as your opponents load heat, then they're going to be able to go through the left and the right of the gun. By far the most annoying thing about this vehicle is because of the lack of gun depression, quite often you don't get to use the full gun depression in this tank. And God forbid that you're actually aiming up slightly at your opponents trying to make this thing work, because then the whole of your turret gets absolutely destroyed. And also, I should mention that the top of this tank is very thinly armored at less than 41 millimeters, meaning that all 122 millimeter caliber guns can overmatch this tank. And so if your opponents are slightly above you, this turret armor just falls to AP shells annoyingly. And if they're loading heat from above you with decent heat, the whole of your turret feels like it's green. So this was undoubtedly one of the biggest frustrations about the tank for me, is that I felt like, considering that it has poor mobility, poor gun handling, and not the best firepower, that it would have a lot more armor to go with it, but it just doesn't. However, it does get 1,950 hit points, which does make the vehicle durable, and is a good contender for a durability device on this vehicle to keep those tracks going when you're bobbing around and trying to side scrape. And add to this, decent camera rating, not nearly as good as the K91, but very decent. This thing does well with an exhaust and a vision system. And if I might say so, if I take the K91 and the TVP out of here, the ST version 2 has exactly the same camera rating as the Tier 9 Premium. And really, when I look at it statistically, it's as if Wargaming just took the Tier 9 Premium and just moved the slider ever so slightly up to make it at Tier 10. But maybe that's me being cynical. The final word should be to this vehicle's poor base view range of 390, which means that unless you have a very good crew and a premium consumable, you're not going to really be taking the final field mod, and even if you do, you'll be leaving yourself in an awkward situation. Unless you take coated optics. But do you really want to take coated optics on your tanks that aren't lights in 2024? So crew-wise, this vehicle just has a standard Soviet medium tank loadout, where it's got a commander, a gunner, a driver, and a loader, and the commander is also the radio operator on this tank. Crew skills-wise, I would recommend Brothers, Repairs, Concealment, Recon, Emergency, and Coordination for your commander skills. On your radio operator, Situation Awareness, Firefighting, and Jamming, as this thing does burn quite a lot. For your gunner, Brothers, Repairs, Concealment, Deadeye, Designated Target, and Armorer. Possibly if you don't care about spotting or knowing if your opponents are weak, you could drop Designated Target and use Snapshot on this tank. But its gun handling it's not good, but it's not so bad that I would probably try to prioritize there. And remember, this thing's accuracy is poor, which is why I want to use Armorer. For your driver skills, Brothers, Repairs, Concealment, Off-Road Driving, Engineer, and Smooth Ride. If you're an absolute mad lad, you could take this 40-ton tank and put Controlled Impact on it instead of Smooth Ride, and maybe take the final field mod as well. But honestly, I don't think it's going to be that useful situationally, and I would not spec the vehicle that way. For your loader, Brothers, Repairs, Concealment, Ammo Tuning, Safe Stowage, and Adrenaline Rush. Really no point of intuition on this tank, because you're going to have to fully load 2 very slow shells to quickly load 1 that you could have reloaded in 6 seconds anyway. So if you don't want any of these, I'd probably focus on something like Close Quarters Combat or Perfect Charge if you want to be a little bit of a sniper. Equipment-wise on this vehicle, I tried a few different builds. Firstly, I tried without the vert stabs. That was a big mistake. This tank definitely needs vert stabs. Even when you're sitting still, you're not going to be fully aimed with its poor aim time between its 2-second intra-clip reload. So I would recommend taking vert stabs, durability, and vents on this vehicle. This is an all-round combat performance because you can't use a gun rammer as it's an auto loader. For my second build, I'm going to be using vents, I'm going to be using a commander's vision system, and I'm going to be using an exhaust. This build is really proficient on this tank, and you can actually get the camera rating up to a staggering 40% while moving, making yourself more of a light tank for those sneaky maps. And remember, for those of you who have got a lot of credits, whack a focus on target directive. It will cost you 20,000 credits a game, 18,000 if you buy them in bulk, and it will double the time of designated target up to 15 seconds. Field mods wise, I would recommend taking the module durability increase. I would recommend taking the accuracy. I'd recommend taking the concealment on this tank for when you want to play sneaky. For the penultimate field mod, I'm personally going to take the vehicle hit points, as I like to use the durability for those close quarters combat situations. But if you don't use the durability, there might even be an argument to take the aiming speed instead if you just want to be a sniper. Now for the real tough decision, the final field mod. Now, if you don't want to use coated optics, if you decide to be able to enhance the vehicle's engine and its ramming capacity with vents, a premium consumable, and perfect crew skills, your view range is going to go down to 443. That's a little bit awkward. If you go the other way, sure, you're going to have lots of view range, but you're going to be limiting the amount of ramming damage you can deal and receive, and your engine power as well. I feel like this is a candidate where the pay-to-win players should not take a field mod, but if you don't use a premium consumable on this tank, then you'll notice that the view range drops down to a very awkward level for a free-to-play player of 436. And so you might even want to actually not take coated optics, but take the view range field mod and then consider taking a turbo on the tank. But considering that most players who get this tank are going to be incredibly sweaty, I very much doubt that we'll have people playing these tanks without premium consumables. Anyway, that's everything that you need to know about the ST-62 version 2 and how to set it up. Let's take this thing out to the battlefield and see how it handles. Okay, so firstly we're going to be rolling out on mines. On a map like this with a tank that's not the fastest and doesn't have the best gun depression, I don't really want to contest the hill. So instead I'm going to try and make a push play down the west. Now, I'd like to highlight that while you saw me messing around with Bond equipment inside the garage, because I do expect that people are going to put Bond equipment on their Clan Wars reward tanks, I'm going to be using standard equipment in this game so that you can see how the vehicle performs without it. Now, I did play a few games with Bond equipment, and it definitely made the gun feel a lot better with that extra 7.5% reduced dispersion. But the vehicle is still at least kind of playable without it. Alright, so Borask in position. What do I want to do here? Well, I want to try and get some shots in across the side. I'm going to knock that tree down to try and give me a little bit of cover. I'm just hoping that Centurion is going to make some mistakes. But unfortunately, unlike our hero Luki the other day, that I'm not going to be spotting any of these TDs. And that bloomin' T-103 manages to get me. One thing I'd like to highlight is look how weird the rear of this tank is. It's so short. The tank is quite stubby in a way. It's obviously not the tallest, but it's got quite an easy side profile to still be able to hit. It's still quite large within that regard. But it's so weird to think that you can kind of just put the vehicle like this and then really test the reactions of your opponents to see if they're going to be able to hit you or not, considering how little room there is on the tank on the back. It kind of feels a bit like the Czechoslovakian light tanks within that regard. Maybe the Blesk at tier 8 with how stubby this tank is. It's a very weird armor design in every single way, as you saw in the armor review part of this video. It's so bizarre to think that always the front of the vehicle is penetratable, but man, when you get going, that's what this tank is about. That's 960 damage in 4 seconds. That is a terrifying burst. And it doesn't matter how good of equipment you put on a K91. It doesn't matter if you have the field mod that increases its rate of fire by 3% or a premium consumable to be able to get that reload down as well. Doesn't matter if you get your reload of the K91 when you're injured with adrenaline rush down to like 4.5 seconds. It's never going to feel the same as a 2-second intra clip. However, just look how long this gun kind of feels to be able to get that third shell in. We're waiting a long time for this second shell, and if I was to fire now, not only would I lose all of the progress, I would lose the shell that was in the tank, as auto-reloaders work. And so you have to have these quite long, extended periods of downtime to be able to... You see what I mean? I was nearly loaded with my third shell there. I wanted to get the kill on my opponents. The shell just whiffs. I whiff another shell. It's kind of frustrating when you're in those situations. You think you've got an opportunity for the perfect kill. You don't have the time to be able to reload to get that third shell in to try and optimize your damage per minute in that way. So you fire to confirm the kill before they pull back around the corner, and then you're stuck having to wait for like another 30 seconds or so to be able to then get a full mag in. And so that downtime, it's staggering. It really is staggering to have to wait 30 seconds to be able to do 960 damage. If I was in a TVP could literally unload its entire mag and reload in that time. And it's not 3 shells, And it's been able to do it with better accuracy, better gun handling, and it's done it with a better intra-clip reload. So if you think this thing is going to be a TVP, I'd hate to disappoint you. It's not. So I guess when I played this vehicle, I was thinking its armor was going to matter more. However, the average damage that I blocked in this vehicle was actually not that great. So either I'm bad at playing hold-down Soviet tanks, and maybe if you're better at playing hold-down Soviet tanks than me, even though I feel like my 430U is one of my best tanks in my medium lineup. I'm winning pretty much about 2/3 of my games solo, and I'm quite often ending the game with like 4,000 damage blocked, just like an absolute mad lad. But this thing, because of that hull, I just couldn't manage to make it work. And it's very frustrating to try and find positions where 6 degrees of gun depression will work on this tank. So, I decided we're going to make a push play. It's that stage of a game where we've got our opponents kind of like a little bit surrounded or on the hill, and we've even got some pressure on the Jagdpanzer. And so I'm going to wait. I want to try and get that extra shell in. So, boom, 1, 2. It's not quite as fast as a TVP, is it, right? That half a second definitely makes a big difference on the feel of the burst. And when I think about it, now that the bat chat has been buffed, right? The bat chat, fair enough, it takes 2.74 seconds to be able to fire each of its shells, but that's doing 390. So this tank will do 640 in 2 seconds. A bat chat in 2.74 is actually doing 780. But this thing then catches up, does 960 in 4. Before the bat chat will do, it's like 1,100 damage in its 5.5 seconds. So this tank, it doesn't feel that scary with the autoloader. It's not terrifying, but it's definitely no slouch. Only think about a Progetto's doing 360 every 2.5 seconds. This thing, it's not outrageous with regards to that. However, in that engagement that you just saw, this thing was actually phenomenal because it was able to dump its 3 rounds on Patton the tank, rest in peace, and then it was able to reload a single shot to be able to finish off the Barask after. So for those kind of situations where you're just traveling around and you don't know how much downtime you're going to have, and then, for example, I'm going to wait for 2 shells here because it's economical and it'll save me a little bit of DPM, but not if I just whip my shots into the back there. And I wanted to fire both of those, by the way, because I was running out of APCR rounds, as you can see. Good boy, QuickyBaby has not been loading full gold in this game to be able to get into this position. And, oh yeah, that Udez is in trouble now. And luckily, we actually pulled off a miracle bounce on our outside plate there. In this kind of situation, I should probably be side-scraping, but I feel like it would be slower for me to react. I'm just hoping that I can bait this E4 into whiffing on the front of my tracks or whiffing on the front of my tank, and there we go. Lovely jubbly. Couldn't have bounced that, I don't think, in a TVP. But unfortunately, I didn't even really get that much from that T110E4. So a solid game here. In 6.5 minutes, we managed to pick up 6,800 combined or whatever it is without too much stressing. But let's be honest, this was a nice matchup for the tank. And really, this game, it shows all of kind of the strengths and also, I guess, the weaknesses of this tank. It's a solid vehicle. It's a damage pumper. But never in this game did I really feel like, wow, this tank rocks. So now I want to show another couple of examples of where the ST-62 can feel really good. And I feel that the way that the tank has to be played for it to have any kind of specialty inside World of Tanks. And that is, okay, light tank. Hello, light tank. Yeah, I have an autoloader light tank. I know you're powerful on Redshire light tank. I don't care. I'm going in. Dump. There we go. 426 damage dealt, and I've still got 1 round to spare. Take the center of the position, but now, oh gosh. Oh, Progetto kills my gunner. Oh, here comes a Leopard as well. Do I fire? Of course I do. I'm not going to wait for the 3rd shell for 8 seconds if I can reload quicker if I just dump out the 2 shells. No point in waiting in that scenario. Don't get baited into waiting for the 3rd. Just go in and just not bouncing anything, but at least we still managed to get the frag on the Leopard there. Lucky, I guess, because the 430 was able to help us out. And then somehow we whiffed the shell on the Progetto 65. So in this kind of a situation, let's say I had gone all in a TVP. If I went all in a TVP there, I would have destroyed the Manticore, sure, but then I have to have like that 20-second reload afterwards. The Leopard would have all-in'd me, and I would be back in the garage. However, because this vehicle manages to reload its shells one by one, and then when it's empty, it's got good damage per minute. You just have these scenarios where you can just get in and be able to be aggressive against your opponents and not actually have to worry about what's going to happen in the situation afterwards. It's kind of like a bit of a smooth brain auto reloader from that regard. There's no skill in thinking like, should we wait? It's more of a case of, can we pen? And if the answer is yes, unless you've only got like a second maybe on reloading the second shell, or a couple of seconds to reload that shell, just shoot anyway. I would never wait for longer than about 3 seconds to be able to, or 3 or 4 seconds to be able to get another shell in before you just dump it and then start reloading. That's the way that you play this rather smooth brain tank. So now I'm going to show just how proficient this thing is with its 40% camo if you take an exhaust on this tank. Now, you could get it higher if you were to use an exhaust directive, but those things are rare, cost bonds. I don't think it's really too sustainable, but you could end up with like 41 or 42% camo that way, which would be outrageous. And that's on the move. That's not when you're sitting still. When you're sitting still, it's 50. So this thing, if it gets into a position and it sits still, it's not going to be spotted in multiple bushes unless it is proxy spotted. And you could probably sit still in a bush with this thing and end up with them needing to come within like 100 meters of you to be able to get it done. So I'm going to start my ST-62 journey here thinking, should I shoot at the 780? I don't think that 780 really thought whether they should shoot at me as they nail me on the move, but luckily the turret armor actually holds true. So unlike something like a TVP, for example, you do have a little bit of armor. So I let this IS-7 know that I'm going to help them, and I'm going to go into position to hopefully isolate this 780 and be able to handle them. But I know that usually... K91 in the bushes. Okay. So I put one into the back of my IS-7, not his fault. I tracked the guy there once, hit him a third time, and I'm going to let my repair happen naturally. And in this situation, yeah, a little bit awkward. Now, the IS-7 is actually a very good player. We can see the IS-7 has 3 marks of excellence, and the IS-7, I don't think they quite know what the ST-62's capabilities are. So he's asking CD ? So I guess he thinks that I'm like a regular autoloader, but I'm not an auto reloader, but a regular autoloader. And so I guess I should have communicated that I have a 3-round burst, but it takes me long to get the 3 rounds in. And I think this IS-7 really wants to push in this situation, but I'm just really worried about getting tagged by the 60 TP and that K91 in the bush, or the 2 artilleries as well. So my armor is not that good. So he's asked me CD again. I'm going to press my F8 key to let him know I've got 3 shells. I'm just really worried about that K91. And we're going to have a little bit of a miscommunication here, and that is that I just really don't. I get hit by Arty, and I get hit by the K91. I guess I could have used my repair kit there, but I'm worried about the 60 TP getting the shot in as well. And I can't go around that corner. And he says, why in capitals? And I say, too much, mate. I love the IS-7. I love the way that this guy's trying to communicate. I love the way that they're trying to make a play and make the tactics happen. But I know the limitations of my tank, and this thing's hull armor especially, it's just not Soviet. I can't be able to handle that. The IS-7 says no in capitals, as if he's just turned into Darth Vader. And I do feel like a little bit of a villain here, leaving him to hold that position. But you know what? There's a Bat Chat that could be sneaking up behind us. There's a Manticore as well that could be coming after us. I'm going to have to go and deal with this Death Star trench run here to go and dig out the filthy French before maybe I can go back and assist our Soviet allies there to be able to take on the southern front. So having dealt with the Bat Chat, now I'm after the Manticore, and oh, this thing's hull armor, it's so frustrating, it really is. It just goes in and it's... Yeah. I should really come to the conclusion of this tank. Undoubtedly, beyond communication, as you can see, I'm stumbling with my words here. This tank is unbelievably frustrating to play with this thing's hull armor for a tank that has 6 degrees of gun depression. I'd say the Object 140 has better frontal armor, especially if you're using that tank's 7 degrees of gun depression. I'd say this thing's turret is maybe just a little bit better than the 140, but I don't know about you. I would rather have 7 degrees of gun depression, be able to work more positions easier, and have a little worse armor. So in this situation, I'm going to fire 2 in the Progetto, and I had a bit of an epiphany moment here. And that is that this tank can quite often get away with firing 2, but if you try to sit there for 4 seconds to fire 3, that's when you get hit. So when you play this tank, if you unlock it from maneuvers or you bid on it. Don't be afraid to do a double shot when you're out in the open. Quite often your opponents won't be able to react with that 2 seconds, but do you really think you can sit there for 4 seconds and not be greedy? That's what my recommendation would be to you. Think of it like a Borask. One of the reasons why the Borask is so good, because it dumps 2 and it falls back, right? You're so tempted in this tank, though, with its relatively short intra-clip reload of 2 seconds to be able to try and get that 3rd shell in. But more often than not, that's where I get caught with my hand in the cookie jar. So this tank, firing 2, reloading 2, it's pretty good within that regard. So just use that information to hopefully make some better, less greedy trades. But obviously it depends on what's available to, or what kind of a pressured position you're in. One thing I'd like to highlight about this vehicle is that it actually does really well with an exhaust vision system build. And that is because it can't use a gun rammer, right? So what are you sacrificing? You're sacrificing the vert stabs and you're sacrificing a little bit of the hit points. Well, on these kind of maps, they're quite often not all-in engagements where you're going around a corner and blitzing through something as quickly as you can. I mean, sometimes it still happens on bushy maps that you have to do that, but quite often not. And so I'd say that this tank is actually one of the best for these kind of like long-range, airy-fairy, bushy maps. I'd say that this tank is in its element, and I would thoroughly recommend that people who get this tank try out the Vents Vision System exhaust build on this tank. Again, as long as you don't take that final field mod, if you've got good cruise skills and using a premium consumable, you're still going to get that like 450 meters view range, which is more than enough with a vision system. But to be able to have this 40% camo, to get around, to be sneaky in these bushes, and to be able to get your drop shots on your opponents, and to be able to deliver them a 1-2 punch, and then be able to fall back behind the bush, yeah, this thing is incredibly solid within that regard. And so, this tank, it's really a little bit different. It's not the kind of all-in, brawling Soviet medium that you would expect it would be to have a tank that fires 3 shells and then reloads quickly, right? It's kind of... It's not, but it's also not quite a K91 with that sustained damage. And remember, its view range is not nearly as good as a K91. And not just that, its accuracy isn't as good as a K91, and its damage per minute isn't as good as a K91. And its gun depression literally is 3 degrees worse than the K91. But if you use a vision system exhaust and the K91 does not, maybe he was firing in that scenario, at least we can still outspot them. And I'm a way more flexible tank within that regard with these 3 rounds. Just not flexible when it comes to sustained damage output or having that gun depression on a ridgeline. And so I think that this tank is going to be its best tank on maps like this. This is like the perfect map for this tank. You see that we waited just a second there to be able to get that second shell in, so that maybe now we're going to have 2 for the SW1. And if that's the case, that's just absolutely perfect. Am I going to wait here just a second, pick up the kill, keep that emergency shell in, and for playing like this, it's not too bad. However, if I see that someone shoots a T-92 and I'm on 7 kills, yeah, you know what? Anyway, I've got 1 more shell left, so it's not too much of a big deal. We're going to finish them off, go for the RT. He's behind a building, go right towards the edge, fully aim the shot in, and react fairly quickly to pick up our first Radley Walters medal in an ST-62 version 2. And this was a good game. And I think the i7 gave me a thumbs up at the end, possibly. Yeah, and shout out to the i7. I'm sorry I disappointed you by not going in earlier. So, the ST-62 version 2. On these kind of maps, I think it'll do well on a map like Fisherman's Bay. It'll do well on a map like this. Well on a map like Muravanka. Very well on those bushy maps where you don't sacrifice the gun rammer to be able to gain immense scouting capability. And the camo rating on this tank, as I said, you can get to 40 on the move with a vision system and vents. Yeah, this thing is very proficient on those kind of bushy maps. The real problem is that when you end on those city maps, apart from side scraping and hoping that your opponents suck and shoot your side and don't shoot your upper hull, gosh, does this thing feel frustrating. And I'd far rather play a different Soviet medium tank. So, all in all, the ST-62. My conclusion to this tank is it's good. I don't think it's crazy good. I don't think it's overpowered. I think it's going to be good. I only think like a Soviet medium would be OP if you couldn't pen its frontal hull when it's exposing itself. And that's kind of like 430 U level. This thing's going to be annoying to play against. Because if you, for example, trade 1-for-1 with it and you don't pressure it, to be able to dump that mag, then it's going to be able to save those 3 shells and whittle you down slowly but surely, and then dive in to be able to dump that magazine. It'll be able to have that favorable outcome. It'll also be annoying when one of them just goes all in against you like I did that Manticore, and then now it's got its highest damage per minute, bizarrely enough, while it's unloaded. But ladies and gents, here's the real conclusion to this video, and that is, this tank, honestly, it's just not fun. For me, it's not a fun tank. It doesn't have the armor. It doesn't have a great gun. It doesn't have great mobility. It doesn't have the best of view range. It's got good scouting capacity, but everything that you saw in this video, I could have done in a K91 outside of those 1-2 bursts that I wanted to dish against my opponents. And honestly, I think that most players are going to do just as well, if not significantly better, in a K91 than this tank. And then people who want to be an autoloader are going to do better in a bat chat or a TVP. And then people who want to have armor, just get your 430U out, and then you're going to be bouncing things left, right, and center, and you can go and just like drive in front of people and absolutely laugh at them. I had so little fun playing this tank. But don't get me wrong, it's not a bad tank. It just never really feels like it truly excels in a situation. It's almost like this all-purpose medium tank, and from that regard, you're never going to do badly in this tank. But I never truly feel that you're going to have those outrageous games as consistently as you would do in something like a TVP or a K91. And for those of you who think that I might be being a little bit harsh on this tank, let's take a look at what its kind of spiritual tank, the Object 590 at tier 9, is doing inside World of Tanks. Well, it's doing pretty well. It's got one of the best win ratio differences, and it's also got one of the best win ratios for the tier 9 mediums. However, when we look at the amount of battles that have been played in an Object 590 over the last 30 days on the European server, more people are playing the Object 283 and the T54D by 50% than are playing the Object 590. And even though I have one and I love tier 9 and I love playing premium tanks to make bonds, to make credits, I'd never really want to take an Object 590 out onto the battlefield, because just as I said in my tank review for that, it suffers so much that it's trying to make itself so flexible with this auto-reloader that has none of the drawbacks, that it has none of the benefits that actually makes a tank fun. And so my final recommendation for all of the Clan Wars players, and firstly, I'd like to clarify, I haven't played the 116, the T95E6, or the 907 very much, is that if you're lucky enough to be able to get one of these vehicles for free, I'd probably still take the 907 for a little bit of memes, and because it's just so infamous inside the game. But really, that VK7201K, that's about as flavor as the month as it gets. And while the ST-62 version 2 is by no means a bad tank, and I think it will do well inside the game, I can't see it becoming the new favorite. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was my in-depth look at the ST-62 version 2. Really hope this one helps you to make your decision about whether you should pick the tank up. If it does and you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And for once again, the 95% of you out there who will never get this tank, don't worry when you fight this. Just fire at the flattest part at the front with AP, and you're pretty much always going to go in unless it's using its gun depression. And also, this thing, it fails really badly against heat. So if you have heat, just load heat and make it suffer in the hull. Just shoot the part that's nearest you, and you're going to frustrate the living daylights out of that Clan Wars player. And let me know in the comments down below, are you going to try and get the ST-62 version 2? And if you're watching this video as it's released on Wednesday, I'm going to be going live all day on twitch.tv/QuickyBaby with brand new Halloween drop tokens. So come and get them and get yourself a funky tier 9 3D style. So really looking forward to seeing you all live right now. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.